I was folding laundry in the guest room on a Tuesday afternoon when my phone buzzed on the dresser. The sound was ordinary, unremarkable, the kind of notification I'd heard 1,000 times before. But somehow, this one would split my life into before and after. My son's name appeared on the screen, Evan. I smiled without thinking, the way mothers do when they see their child's name, no matter how old that child has become. He'd been talking about our upcoming family cruise for weeks, the Caribbean, 7 days of turquoise water, tropical sunsets, and time with my granddaughter Lily. I'd been counting down the days like a schoolgirl waiting for summer vacation. I picked up the phone, still holding a towel against my chest, and opened the message. The first line seemed normal enough. Then I read further. "Mom, Anita and I talked. We think it's better if this cruise is just for the 3 of us. Quality family time. You understand, right?" I stood there, completely still, as the words rearranged themselves in my mind. Read them again, then once more, hoping I'd misunderstood something fundamental about the English language. Just for the 3 of us. The towel slipped from my hands onto the floor. I didn't pick it up. My eyes stayed fixed on that screen, on those neat little letters that had just unmade everything I'd been looking forward to. Quality family time. I wanted to laugh, or scream, or call him immediately and ask what kind of cruel joke this was, but I did none of those things. I just stood there in a room full of neatly folded laundry, feeling the air grow heavier around me. The guest room had always been my favorite space in the house. Soft yellow walls, white curtains that caught the afternoon light, a quilt my mother had sewn decades ago draped across the bed. This was where Evan used to sleep when he visited during college, where Lily napped when she was a baby, where I'd imagined us all gathering before the cruise, laughing over packing lists and sunscreen debates. Now it felt like a museum of memories that no longer mattered. I sat down slowly on the edge of the bed, phone still gripped in my hand. The screen had gone dark, but I could still see those words burned into my mind. You understand, right? Did I understand? Did I understand that my own son was uninviting me from a vacation I had paid for? That the daughter-in-law I'd welcomed into our family had convinced him I was somehow, what? Inconvenient? Embarrassing? Too old to be included in their perfect little trio? Before you judge me for what I'm about to tell you, let me ask you something. Where are you watching this from right now? What time is it where you are? Drop a comment below and let me know, because I want to understand if I'm the only one who's ever felt this particular kind of heartbreak. And if this story resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe. You'll want to hear what happened next. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Evan. We'll still celebrate when we get back. Maybe a dinner or something. A dinner! Or something. $22,000. That's what I'd spent on this cruise. The tickets, the suite with the balcony, Anita insisted we needed, the excursion packages, the specialty dining plan. I'd put it all on my credit card without hesitation, because Evan had called me one evening, his voice warm with excitement, talking about how amazing it would be to finally take a real family vacation together. "Mom, Lily keeps asking when we're going to see dolphins," he'd said. "And Anita found this incredible ship. It has everything. We could finally make some memories together. We. Together. Family." Apparently those words had expiration dates I wasn't aware of. I looked around the guest room, at the Vita I'd built so carefully after my husband died 10 years ago. Robert had worked 40 years as a mechanic, his hands always stained with grease, his back always aching. But he'd smiled through every long shift because he believed in something simple: family first. That's our wealth, Linda. That's what matters. I'd tried to honor that. I'd given Evan everything I could, helped with his college tuition when scholarships fell short, co-signed his first apartment lease when his credit wasn't established, babysat Lily every weekend for 2 years so he and Anita could build their careers. I'd shown up. I'd been there. And now, I wasn't invited to a trip I'd paid for with money Robert had spent his life earning. I sat there as the afternoon light shifted across the yellow walls, turning everything golden, then amber, then gray. The dryer hummed in the distance. Life continued its normal rhythm, while mine had just shattered into something I didn't recognize. This wasn't about a cruise. I understood that much. This was about being erased, forgotten, deemed unnecessary by the very people I'd built my entire life around. And as I sat there in the growing darkness, something inside me began to change. Not anger exactly, not yet. Just a quiet, crystallizing realization that I'd given too much for too long to people who'd learned to take without seeing. The phone buzzed one more time. I didn't look at it. That night, sleep didn't come. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind pulling me back through the years like pages turning in reverse. I thought about Robert, my husband, gone 10 years now, but still so present in the walls of this house, in the lessons he'd taught our son, in the values we'd tried to pass down like heirlooms. Robert had been a mechanic, not the kind who owned the shop, but the kind who arrived at 6 a.m. and left after dark, his fingernails permanently rimmed with grease no amount of scrubbing could remove. He'd smelled like motor oil and honest work, and I'd loved him for it. We didn't have much back then. Our first apartment had paper-thin walls and a refrigerator that hummed so loudly we couldn't hear the television. But we had each other, and we had dreams for our baby boy. Evan was born in that tiny apartment. I remember Robert holding him for the first time, tears streaming down his weathered face, whispering promises about the life our son would have. Better than ours. Easier. Fuller. "He won't have to break his back like I do," Robert had said, kissing Evan's tiny forehead. "We'll make sure of that." And we did. Every overtime shift Robert picked up, every birthday present I went without, every vacation we skipped, it all went into a jar labeled Evan's future. We saved for years. When he got accepted into college, we were ready. Not completely, but enough. Robert worked double shifts that entire freshman year, his hands shaking from exhaustion at the dinner table. I took a second job at the grocery store, stocking shelves at night, while my feet screamed for rest. Evan never knew the full extent of it. We made sure of that. We wanted him to focus on his studies, to chase opportunities without the weight of guilt holding him back. He graduated with honors, got a job at a tech startup. Within 5 years, that startup exploded into something worth millions. My son became successful, truly successful, and I was so proud I could barely contain it. But somewhere between his first promotion and his first luxury car, something shifted. Phone calls became shorter. Visits became rarer. The boy who used to sit at this very kitchen table, eating my meatloaf and telling me about his dreams, slowly transformed into someone who checked his watch during conversations and talked about things I didn't understand. Quarterly projections, market disruptions, investment portfolios. Then he met Anita. She was beautiful in that polished, practiced way that some women master. Perfect hair that never moved in the wind. Clothes that looked expensive even when they were casual. A smile that seemed designed for photographs rather than genuine moments. When Evan first brought her home for Sunday dinner, she'd complimented my pot roast with a tone that somehow made it sound inadequate. "This is so homey," she'd said, pushing the carrots around her plate. "Evan, you never told me your mother was such a traditional cook." I'd smiled and thanked her, not quite sure if I'd been insulted or praised. Anita came from money, real money. The kind that built wings on hospitals and had streets named after grandparents. She'd grown up with housekeepers and private schools, summers in Europe and winters in Aspen. Everything Evan and I had worked toward, she'd simply been born into. I tried not to judge. Love finds us in unexpected places, and Evan seemed genuinely smitten. At their wedding, which cost more than our first house, I watched my son dance with his bride under lights that probably cost more than Robert's entire annual salary. Anita's family filled one side of the venue, dressed in designer labels and discussing their second homes. Our side was smaller, simpler. Cousins in their Sunday best, friends from the old neighborhood, people who knew the value of $1 because they'd had to count every one. Evan had changed his last name placement on the wedding program. Matthew Evans instead of Evan Matthews. Anita's suggestion, he'd explained. It sounded more sophisticated for business cards. After they married, the distance grew faster. They bought a house in Coral Springs, 5 bedrooms for 3 people. A pool that looked like something from a resort magazine. Furniture that seemed too perfect to actually sit on. I visited once, and Anita gave me a tour that felt more like a real estate showing than a welcoming. "The kitchen is Italian marble," she'd said, running her hand along the counter. Custom imported, and these fixtures are from a boutique in Milan. We really wanted something that reflected our lifestyle." I'd nodded and smiled and pretended I understood why anyone needed a chandelier in their bathroom. Evan started missing Sunday dinners. Too busy, too tired, too many networking events. Anita needed him at functions where appearance mattered, where the right conversations could lead to the right connections. I understood, or at least, I told myself I did. But standing in their gleaming kitchen that day, watching my son check his phone while his wife discussed thread counts, I realized something painful. Success hadn't just changed Evan's circumstances, it had changed his heart. The boy who used to help his father change oil in our driveway now had people who did everything for him. The young man who'd cried when Robert died now rarely mentioned his father at all. The son I'd raised to value character over appearance had married someone who seemed to value only what could be seen and measured. I drove home that evening feeling something I'd never felt before. Not quite sadness, not quite disappointment. Just a hollow recognition that the family I'd built was becoming something I no longer recognized. And I had no idea how to fix it. The morning after that sleepless night, I made myself tea and sat at my kitchen table with my laptop. The house was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that forces you to hear your own thoughts, whether you want to or not. I opened my online banking portal, something I'd been avoiding for weeks. Numbers appeared on the screen in neat columns, each one representing a choice I'd made, a trust I'd extended, a boundary I'd failed to set. The cruise charge stared back at me. $22,417 charged to my credit card 6 weeks ago. I remembered that day clearly. Evan had called, excited about a last-minute deal on an upgraded suite. The deadline was midnight. Could I just put it on my card? They'd pay me back next month once Anita's bonus came through. Next month had come and gone. So had the month after that. I scrolled further. My emergency credit card, the one I'd given them during what Evan called a temporary cash flow issue last year. The agreement was simple: emergencies only, medical bills, car repairs, actual needs. Instead, I found charges at luxury hotels, a spa in South Beach, online boutiques with names I couldn't pronounce, a wine bar in Fort Lauderdale, dinner at a steakhouse that apparently charged $60 for a cut of meat, multiple charges, weekly, sometimes daily. My hand trembled slightly as I added up the total. Over the past year, they'd spent $43,000 on my emergency card. $43,000 that Robert had earned dollar by sweating dollar, that I'd saved penny by careful penny. I sat back in my chair, the tea growing cold in my cup. This wasn't about helping family through hard times. This was about funding a lifestyle I could never afford for myself while they treated my accounts like an unlimited allowance. I thought about the times Anita had mentioned being stretched thin financially, how she'd sighed about wanting to redecorate their already perfect living room, but needing to be responsible. All while my card was paying for her weekly spa treatments and designer handbag purchases. My phone dinged, an email notification. I almost ignored it. But something made me look. The sender was Anita. The subject line read, "Beach House Options." It was addressed to someone named Veronica, probably one of her country club friends. But at the bottom of the email chain, I saw my name. She'd accidentally included me in a forward. My finger hovered over the delete button. Some instinct told me I didn't want to read this. But a stronger instinct, the one that had been whispering warnings for months, made me scroll down. The email was dated 3 weeks ago. Before the cruise cancellation, before that devastating text message, Anita's words appeared in crisp black text. "Once the house is in Evan's name alone, we can stop depending on her. It's embarrassing having your mother involved in everything. She's sweet, but she's not our circle. Let's just get through this cruise, and then we can create some distance. I'm thinking of telling Evan we should spend the holidays with my family from now on. His mother still uses paper napkins at dinner parties. Paper napkins. I can't." I read it once, then again, then a third time, each word landing like a small stone in my chest. Not our circle. Paper napkins. Create some distance. I thought about every Sunday dinner I'd hosted, carefully setting the table with my good dishes, the ones I'd received as a wedding gift 40 years ago. I thought about the paper napkins I'd used because they were practical, and I'd been raised not to waste money on things that got thrown away. I thought about how Anita had smiled at those dinners, complimented my cooking, hugged me goodbye at the door, all while finding me embarrassing. My eyes burned, but no tears came. I was beyond crying. This was something else entirely, a clarity so sharp it almost felt like relief. They weren't just taking my money, they were taking my dignity, my place in my own family, my son, and they'd been planning it, strategically, coldly. I closed the laptop and stood up, walking to the window. Outside, my small garden was blooming. Tomatoes I'd planted in spring, roses that had been there since Robert and I first bought this house. Everything growing in its own time, in its own way, without pretense or apology. I'd built this life with my hands, with love, with sacrifice, and somewhere along the way, I'd let people convince me that it wasn't enough, that I wasn't enough. The woman who used paper napkins, the mother who was too old, too boring, too beneath their circle to join a cruise she'd funded. I stood there for a long time, watching the morning light move across my garden. A hummingbird visited the feeder I'd hung last week. A neighbor walked by with her dog, waving when she saw me in the window. Normal life continuing while mine rearranged itself into something new. Something clicked inside me then. Not anger, not even hurt anymore. Just a simple, profound understanding. I walked back to the table, opened my laptop again, and looked at those numbers. The cruise, the credit card charges, the mortgage I'd co-signed 3 years ago when they couldn't qualify on their own income. My name on everything, my money behind everything, my presence erased from everything. I thought about Robert, about the values he'd died believing in, family first, but he'd also taught me something else. Something I'd forgotten in my desperate attempt to stay connected to a son who'd already let me go. Respect yourself, Linda. If you don't, nobody else will. I opened a new browser tab and typed in the cruise company's customer service number. Then I whispered to myself, so quietly the words were barely sound. Enough. It was the smallest word I'd spoken in days, but it was the most honest. I made fresh tea, strong, black tea, the way Robert used to drink it in the mornings before work. Something about the ritual of boiling water, steeping the leaves, pouring it into my favorite mug, steadied my hands. The cruise company's phone number was already pulled up on my screen. I dialed, took a sip of tea, and waited. Thank you for calling Paradise Cruise Lines. This is Jennifer speaking. How may I help you today? Her voice was cheerful, trained to handle vacation excitement and booking questions. I wondered briefly if she'd ever fielded a call like the one she was about to receive. Good morning, Jennifer. My name is Linda Matthews. I have a reservation for 3 passengers departing on the 18th of next month. Confirmation number is P7743521. I need to cancel all 3 tickets, please. There was a pause. I could hear typing in the background. I see your reservation here, Mrs. Matthews. Just to confirm, you want to cancel all 3 passengers? That includes yourself and 2 family members listed as Evan Matthews and Anita Matthews? That's correct. All 3. More typing. Then a careful, professional tone. May I ask if there's been an emergency? If it's a medical issue, we might be able to offer a reschedule option instead of full cancellation. No emergency, I said calmly. Just a change of plans. I understand. I do need to inform you that there will be a cancellation fee. Because we're within 60 days of departure, the fee will be approximately 30% of the total booking cost. That comes to about $6,700. The remaining balance will be refunded to your card within 7 to 10 business days. $6,700. Gone. Just like that. A month ago, the amount would have made me hesitate, would have made me call Evan first, try to work it out, find a compromise. But that was before I'd read Anita's email. Before I'd understood exactly how my family saw me. That's acceptable, I said. Please proceed with the cancellation. All right, Mrs. Matthews. I'm processing that now. You should receive a confirmation email within the hour. Is there anything else I can help you with today? No, thank you. You've been very helpful. I hung up and took another sip of tea. My hand was steady. My breathing was even. I felt, strangely, lighter than I had in months. The confirmation email arrived 40 minutes later. 3 tickets canceled. Refund pending. Future cruise credit available if I changed my mind. I wouldn't be changing my mind. Next, I scrolled through my contacts until I found the number for my bank, the mortgage department specifically. This call would be more complicated, but I'd done my research the night before during those sleepless hours. I knew exactly what I needed to say. First National Bank, Mortgage Services. This is David speaking. Hello, David. My name is Linda Matthews. I'm a co-signer on a mortgage account, number 4782933. I need to request removal of my name from that loan. Certainly, Mrs. Matthews. Let me pull up that account. A pause. I see you co-signed this mortgage 3 years ago for a property in Coral Springs. Current balance is approximately $420,000. Can I ask the reason for the removal request? The primary borrowers are financially stable and no longer need my assistance. It was a lie, but a technical one. They should have been stable. Evan made good money. Anita worked part-time as a consultant. Together, their income looked impressive on paper. The problem was their spending habits, their belief that image mattered more than substance. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I see, David said. In order to remove a co-signer, the primary borrowers will need to refinance the loan independently. They'll need to qualify based on their own income and credit. I can start that process. But I should mention that if they don't qualify for refinancing, the bank may require the loan to be paid in full or call the note due within 30 days. I understand completely. All right then, I'll send the formal request through our system today. The primary borrowers will receive notification by mail within 72 hours. They'll have 30 days to either refinance or make alternative arrangements. Thank you, David. I hung up and set the phone down gently on the table. Outside my window, the world continued turning. A delivery truck rumbled past. Someone's wind chimes sang in the breeze. Life moving forward in its ordinary way while I dismantled the financial scaffolding I'd built around my son's life. I wasn't doing this out of spite. That's what I kept telling myself. This wasn't revenge in the traditional sense. I wasn't trying to hurt them or teach them a lesson or make them suffer. I was simply stepping back, removing myself from places I was no longer welcome, taking my name off things that had my signature but not my respect. For years, I'd believed that love meant giving everything, sacrificing endlessly, being available always, never setting boundaries because boundaries felt like walls and walls felt like rejection. But maybe real love meant something different. Maybe it meant teaching people that actions have weight, that relationships require reciprocity, that you can't build a family on the bones of someone who's constantly being asked to disappear. I finished my tea and rinsed the mug in the sink. Through the window above the basin, I could see my garden again. The tomatoes needed watering. The roses could use some deadheading. Simple tasks with visible results. I decided to spend the afternoon outside, my hands in the soil, the sun on my face, doing work that mattered in ways I could see and measure. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt something close to peace. Not happiness exactly, not satisfaction. Just a quiet sense of alignment between who I was and what I was doing. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I was simply, finally, done. And that felt like freedom. 3 days passed in surprising tranquility. I watered my garden, read a novel I'd been putting off for months, even called an old friend from my book club and made plans for lunch. The cancellation emails sat in my inbox like closed chapters, and I didn't reread them. There was no need. Then, on Thursday afternoon, I heard a car pull into my driveway with more speed than necessary. The engine cut off abruptly. A door slammed. I was in the kitchen making a sandwich when the doorbell rang. Not a polite single press, but 3 rapid bursts that sounded like panic translated into sound. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, walked slowly to the door, and opened it. Evan stood on my porch in his work clothes, a pressed polo shirt and khakis that probably cost more than my entire week's grocery budget. His face was flushed, his hair disheveled in a way that suggested he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. His expensive watch caught the afternoon light as he held up his phone like evidence at a trial. "Mom," he said, his voice tight. "Did you cancel the cruise?" "Hello, Evan. Would you like to come in? Did you cancel it?" I stepped aside, gesturing toward the living room. "Let's talk inside." He walked past me, his movements agitated, pacing near the couch rather than sitting. I closed the door gently and made my way to the kitchen. "Would you like some tea?" I called over my shoulder. "Mom, I don't want tea. I want to know what's going on. I got an email from Paradise Cruise Line saying our entire reservation was canceled, all 3 tickets. They refunded your card, but the prices have doubled now. The same cabin we booked is $14,000 more. What happened?" I poured water into the kettle anyway and set it on the stove. Then I walked back to the living room, sat in my favorite armchair, and folded my hands in my lap. "Yes," I said simply. "I canceled the reservation." His mouth opened, closed, then opened again. "Why would you do that? We've been planning this for months. Lily is so excited. I already took the time off work. Anita's been shopping for weeks." "You sent me a text message," I said calmly, explaining that the cruise would be just for the 3 of you. Quality family time, I believe you called it. Since I wasn't included in that family time, it seemed logical to remove my financial contribution as well. He ran his hand through his hair again, a gesture I recognized from his childhood when he'd gotten caught doing something wrong and was searching for an explanation. "Mom, that's not. Anita just thought it might be easier, you know? You get tired on long trips. You don't really enjoy the same things we do." She was trying to make it less stressful for everyone. I let the silence sit between us for a moment. The kettle began to whistle in the kitchen. "I walk 2 miles every morning, Evan. I volunteer at the library twice a week. Last month I helped Mrs. Chen next door move furniture. I'm not tired. I'm 68 years old and in better health than some people half my age. Your wife isn't confusing tired with old, she's confusing unwanted with inconvenient." His face reddened deeper. "That's not fair, isn't it?" I stood and walked to the kitchen, pouring hot water over a tea bag in my favorite mug. "You're welcome to one if you change your mind," I called out. "I don't want tea." His voice rose, cracking slightly. "I want to understand why you're sabotaging our vacation." I walked back slowly, steam rising from my mug, and sat down again. "I paid $22,000 for that cruise, Evan. Every penny came from my account. The suite you wanted, the excursions Anita insisted on, the dining packages, all of it, and then you told me I couldn't come, so I removed my investment from an event I wasn't invited to attend. That's not sabotage. That's common sense. We were going to pay you back. Were you?" I took a sip of tea, watching him over the rim of my mug. "The same way you've been paying back the $43,000 you've charged to my emergency card this past year?" His expression shifted, surprise, then defensiveness. "That was for emergencies. Was the wine bar in Fort Lauderdale an emergency? The spa treatments? The luxury hotels?" I looked at the statements, Evan. Every charge. "I know exactly what my money funded while you told me you were going through a rough financial patch. We needed those things. Networking, client dinners, maintaining appearances for business. You don't understand how my world works." "You're right," I said quietly. "I don't understand a world where you lie to your mother about why you need money, spend it on luxuries, and then exclude her from something she paid for because she doesn't fit your image." He stopped pacing, stood very still. "This is about more than the cruise, isn't it?" "Yes." "Then what is it about?" I set my mug down on the side table carefully. "It's about respect, Evan. It's about recognizing that I'm not an ATM or a backup plan or someone you tolerate until you can afford to cut me out. It's about the fact that I raised you better than this, and somewhere along the way you forgot." "I haven't forgotten anything." "Then why did Anita email her friend saying I'm not your circle, that having me involved in things is embarrassing, that you're planning to create distance after this cruise?" His face went pale. "You read that? She accidentally included me in the forward. I suppose she was too busy discussing my paper napkins to double-check the recipient list." He sat down then, heavily, on the couch, put his head in his hands. "Mom, I didn't know she wrote that. But you agreed with it, didn't you, when she suggested I stay home? When she said I'd be tired or bored or whatever excuse she used, you agreed because part of you believes it too, that I don't belong in your life anymore." "That's not true." I reached beside my chair and picked up a manila folder I'd prepared that morning, slid it across the coffee table toward him. "What's this?" he asked. "A notice from the bank. About the mortgage I co-signed 3 years ago." He opened it slowly. His eyes scanned the page, then widened. "You're removing yourself as co-signer?" "I am." "Mom, we can't refinance. We already tried last year. We don't qualify on our own income." "Then you'll need to make some difficult decisions." He stood up abruptly. "You're going to let us lose the house?" "I'm going to let you face the consequences of building a life you can't actually afford. This is revenge." His voice shook with something between anger and fear. I stood too, meeting his eyes directly. "No, Evan, this is consequence. Revenge would be wanting you to suffer. Consequence is simply stepping back and allowing your choices to teach you what I apparently couldn't. I'm not your safety net anymore. I'm not your backup funding. I'm not the embarrassing mother you tolerate for holiday cards. I'm just a woman who finally remembered she deserves better." He stared at me like I was a stranger. "You've changed. Maybe I've just stopped pretending I haven't noticed how you've changed." He grabbed the folder, his hands shaking slightly, and walked to the door, paused with his hand on the knob, turned back to look at me. "What do you want me to say, Mom?" "I don't want you to say anything. I want you to think. Really think about who you've become and whether that's someone your father would recognize." He left without another word. The door closed softly behind him, and I stood in my quiet living room, listening to his car start and pull away. My tea had gone cold. I picked up the mug anyway and took a sip. It tasted like clarity. My phone started buzzing before Evan's car had even left the neighborhood. I glanced at the screen and saw Anita's name flashing repeatedly. Text after text, each notification overlapping the last in a digital tantrum. I set the phone face down on the kitchen counter and went to finish making my sandwich. Turkey, lettuce, a thin slice of tomato from my garden. Simple, satisfying, real. The buzzing continued. I took my plate to the table, poured a glass of water, and sat down to eat. Outside the window, a cardinal landed on my bird feeder, its red feathers brilliant against the green leaves. I watched it eat, unbothered by the chaos unfolding in my ignored messages. When I finally picked up the phone an hour later, there were 17 texts waiting. "What have you done?" "Evan is devastated. You've ruined everything. This is beyond selfish. We trusted you. You're destroying our family. How could you do this to your own son? We'll never forgive you. Don't expect to see Lily anymore. You've shown your true colors." I read through them all once, feeling nothing but a distant sort of sadness. Not for myself. For the woman who'd written them, so desperate to maintain a facade that she'd attack the person funding it. I didn't respond. Not to a single message. Instead, I deleted the thread, blocked the number, and set my phone back down. The silence that followed felt like clean air after a storm. Within days, I learned through my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, that the family gossip had started. Apparently, Anita had been calling relatives, painting a picture of me as vindictive and cruel. An old woman who'd lost her mind. A bitter mother jealous of her son's success. Someone who couldn't let go of control. Mrs. Chen told me this while we shared tea on her porch one afternoon, her weathered face creased with concern. "Linda, people are saying terrible things. Don't you want to defend yourself?" "No," I said simply. "The people who matter know who I am. The ones who believe gossip without asking questions aren't people I need in my life anyway." She patted my hand, understanding in her eyes. "You're stronger than you look." "I'm exactly as strong as I've always been. I just finally decided to use that strength for myself instead of people who don't value it." That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to the cabinet where Robert's record collection still lived, pulled out his favorite Frank Sinatra album, and placed it on the old turntable we'd bought at a yard sale 30 years ago. The needle crackled as it found the groove, and then Sinatra's voice filled my living room, smooth and timeless. "Come fly with me." I sat in Robert's old armchair, the one I'd kept even though the fabric was worn, and closed my eyes, let the music wash over me. For the first time since he died, I didn't cry listening to these songs. I just felt present, here, alive in my own life, instead of haunting the edges of someone else's. I thought about the difference between revenge and freedom. Revenge would have been calling Evan's business partners, exposing his financial instability, actively trying to damage his reputation. Revenge would have been malicious, calculated to cause maximum pain. But what I'd done wasn't revenge. It was simply withdrawal. I'd stopped participating in my own erasure, stopped funding my own exclusion, stopped accepting scraps of affection from people who'd forgotten how to genuinely love. There's a difference between hurting someone and refusing to be hurt anymore. Over the following weeks, I reconnected with old friends I'd neglected while trying to maintain my place in Evan's busy life. Margaret, who I'd met in a painting class years ago. Susan, my former co-worker from the grocery store. Dorothy from church, who'd invited me to her book club at least a dozen times while I'd made excuses about family obligations. We met for lunch at a small cafe downtown. Nothing fancy, no Italian marble or boutique fixtures, just good food, honest conversation, and laughter that came from actual joy rather than performance. "You look different," Margaret said, studying my face over her coffee cup. "Lighter somehow." "I feel lighter," I admitted. Like I've been carrying something heavy for so long I forgot what it felt like to stand up straight. "What changed?" Susan asked. I thought about how to answer that. I remembered that loving people doesn't mean letting them treat you like you don't matter, and that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is let them face their own consequences. Dorothy raised her glass of iced tea. "To boundaries," she said, "and to friends who remind us we deserve them." We clinked glasses, and I felt something open in my chest. Space for new relationships, room for genuine connection, permission to exist fully, instead of apologetically. That afternoon, I came home and spent hours in my garden. I pulled weeds, planted new herbs in clay pots, arranged river stones around the base of my rose bushes. My hands were dirty, my back was sore, and I felt more myself than I had in years. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I stood in my small backyard and looked at what I'd created. Nothing impressive by Anita's standards. No designer landscaping or expensive features. Just a patch of earth tended with care, growing things that mattered because I'd chosen them. I went inside, washed my hands, and made myself dinner. Just for me. Exactly what I wanted, eaten at my own pace, in my own home. The phone sat silent on the counter, and I'd never felt less alone. 3 weeks passed. I settled into a rhythm I hadn't known I was missing. Morning walks before the heat set in. Afternoons at the library, where I'd started volunteering in the children's section, reading stories to wide-eyed toddlers. Evenings on my porch with a book, or sometimes just the sound of crickets and distant traffic. Peace, I learned, wasn't the absence of problems. It was the presence of boundaries. Then my phone rang on a Tuesday evening. Evan's name appeared on the screen. I considered not answering, but something in me, maybe the part that was still his mother beneath everything else, made me pick up. "Hello, Evan." His voice came through, strained, thinner than I'd ever heard it. "Mom, we need to talk." "I'm listening." "The bank won't refinance us." The words came out rushed, desperate. We spent 2 weeks gathering documents, proving income, everything they asked for. They turned us down. Said our debt-to-income ratio is too high. Something about too many credit accounts and not enough liquid assets. I said nothing. Let him continue. "They sent us a letter. We have 30 days to either pay the full loan amount or vacate the property. Mom, we can't pay $400,000. We don't have it. We can't even come close." "I'm sorry to hear that." "You're sorry?" His voice rose. "That's all you have to say? You're the one who did this." "I removed my name from a loan you should have been able to carry independently. That's not the same as doing this to you, Evan. What's happening now is simply the reality of your financial situation without my support. We were managing fine before you pulled this stunt. Were you? Or were you just managing because I was there to catch you every time you fell?" A pause. I could hear breathing on the other end, harsh and uneven. "Anita is furious," he said finally. "She wants to sue you." "For what? Removing my name from my own financial obligation? She's welcome to try, but I suspect a lawyer will tell her she has no case." "Mom, please." The anger cracked, revealing something raw underneath. "We're going to lose everything. The house, our credit, our reputation. Do you know what this will do to us professionally? Anita's parents are already asking questions. Her friends from the club are gossiping. This is humiliating." "Humiliating," I repeated softly. "Like being called embarrassing by your daughter-in-law? Like being told you're not their circle? Like paying for a vacation you're not allowed to attend?" I apologized for that. "No, Evan, You explained it. You justified it. You never actually apologized. Another pause. Longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted to something more calculated, a tone I recognized from his business calls I'd overheard. What if we sold some things? The furniture, Anita's jewelry. We could come up with maybe 30,000. If you co-signed again, just temporarily, we could get approved for a smaller loan. Keep the house. Start over. No. Mom, I'm begging you. And I'm saying no. Not because I want to see you suffer, but because you need to understand that actions have consequences. You can't spend money you don't have, exclude the people who support you, and expect everything to work out just because it's inconvenient for it not to. So you're really going to let your own son lose his home? It wasn't a question, it was an accusation wrapped in disbelief. I'm going to let a grown man face the results of his choices. There's a difference. I heard a sound in the background, Anita's voice sharp and demanding. Is she helping? What did she say? Evan's voice became muffled as he covered the phone, but I could still make out fragments. She said no. I don't know what else to do. Maybe your parents. Then he was back, clearer now. Anita's parents might be able to help us. They're looking into it. That's good, I said genuinely. Family should help family. Maybe they'll teach you what reasonable support looks like. The kind that comes with respect instead of resentment. You've changed. The words came out bitter, accusatory. The mom I knew would never have done this. I looked out my kitchen window at the garden I'd been tending, at the life I'd been rebuilding one quiet day at a time. You're right, I said. I have changed. Or maybe I've just finally remembered who I am underneath all the years of trying to be what everyone else needed. And who is that? Someone who knows her worth. Someone who understands that love without respect isn't really love at all. Someone your father would be proud of, even if you're not. That's not fair. Fairness, I said quietly, would have been you treating me like I mattered. What you're experiencing now isn't unfairness, Evan. It's equity. You get back what you put in, and you stopped putting anything into our relationship a long time ago. The silence stretched between us like a chasm neither of us knew how to cross. I have to go, he said finally. We have a meeting with a real estate agent tomorrow to discuss listing options. I hope it goes well. Do you really? Or are you happy about this? I'm not happy you're struggling, Evan, but I'm not unhappy that you're learning. There's a difference between those things too, even if you can't see it yet. He hung up without saying goodbye. I set the phone down and returned to the book I'd been reading before he called. A novel about a woman who'd traveled across the country alone at 70, discovering herself in ways she'd never imagined possible. The story felt like a mirror. Outside, the evening stretched long and warm. Somewhere down the street, children were laughing. A dog barked once, then settled. Normal life, continuing its rhythm while individual worlds shifted and reformed. I turned the page and kept reading. 6 weeks later, I was at the grocery store when I saw the listing. I'd been comparing prices on coffee brands, something I'd started doing more carefully now that I was rebuilding my own savings, when a familiar voice called my name. Janet Morrison, a real estate agent who'd helped me sell Robert's truck years ago, was standing near the dairy section with her phone in hand. Linda, I thought that was you. How have you been? We exchanged pleasantries, the kind of surface conversation that happens in grocery store aisles. But then her expression shifted, became more careful. Listen, I saw a listing come through today, your son's house in Coral Springs. I recognize the address from when you mentioned helping them buy it. Are they upgrading? The word upgrading hung in the air between us, heavy with assumptions that no longer applied. Something like that, I said softly. They're making a change. She nodded, understanding more than I'd said. Well, it's a beautiful property. I'm sure it'll move quickly, even in this market. After we parted ways, I stood in the coffee aisle for a long moment, staring at the bags without really seeing them. Then I made a decision. That evening, I drove to Coral Springs. I told myself I wasn't checking on them, wasn't gloating or seeking validation. I just needed to see it one more time. The house that had represented so much of what I'd wanted for my son. Success. Stability. A life better than the one Robert and I had struggled to build. The drive took 40 minutes. I remembered the first time Evan had brought me to see it. 3 years ago, his voice bright with pride as he'd pointed out features I didn't understand the value of. Brazilian hardwood, smart home technology, a kitchen larger than my entire first apartment. Now, as I pulled up across the street, the house looked different. Not the structure itself, which remained as impressive as ever, but something about it felt diminished, like a stage set after the play has ended. The for sale sign stood prominently in the front yard, professional and impersonal. The lawn, usually manicured to country club perfection, showed signs of neglect, grass slightly too long, flower beds with browning edges, the kind of details that emerge when people stop caring about appearances because reality has become too pressing. The pool, visible through the side gate, sat dark and still. No string lights glowing, no water feature bubbling, just flat, black water reflecting the evening sky like an empty promise. I sat in my car as the sun began its descent, watching the house that had cost my son his humility. A couple walked by with a stroller, glancing at the for sale sign with the casual interest of people who might be neighbors soon. Life moving on, as it always does, indifferent to the personal earthquakes happening inside these walls. A light came on in what I knew was the master bedroom. A shadow moved across the window. I wondered if it was Evan or Anita, and what they were thinking in that moment. Were they packing? Fighting? Mourning what they'd built on a foundation they couldn't actually support? I felt sadness then. Not regret, but genuine sorrow for the lessons learned the hard way. For the family that could have been, if pride hadn't gotten in the way. For the grandchild inside who would have to leave the only home she'd known because her parents had confused wealth with worth. But underneath the sadness was something steadier. A quiet certainty that I'd done the right thing, even though it was hard. Especially because it was hard. Robert used to tell me that the most important lessons were the ones that cost something to learn. Easy wisdom doesn't stick, Linda, he'd say. It's the expensive kind that changes us. Evan was learning expensive wisdom now. Another car pulled into the driveway. A woman stepped out carrying a clipboard and wearing a blazer despite the heat. The real estate agent, probably there for measurements or photographs. Professional efficiency preparing to sell off the remnants of a life built beyond its means. I started my car but didn't pull away immediately. Instead, I looked at the house one final time, trying to find words for what I was feeling. This wasn't victory. I'd won nothing except the right to protect my own dignity. This wasn't satisfaction. There was no joy in watching my son lose something, even something he'd pursued for the wrong reasons. This was simply the natural end of an unsustainable situation, gravity asserting itself after years of artificial elevation. Sometimes, I thought, letting go is the kindest thing you can do. Not because you stop caring, but because you care enough to allow someone to fall and then learn to stand on their own. I'd caught Evan so many times over the years. Every stumble, every mistake, every consequence I'd cushioned or erased. I'd thought I was being a good mother, supportive, loving, always there. But maybe the most loving thing I could have done was let him feel the weight of his choices sooner, before the falls became this catastrophic. Before he built a life so precarious that one removed safety net could topple everything. As I drove away, watching the house shrink in my rearview mirror, I whispered something into the quiet of my car. I'm sorry it had to be this way, but I'm not sorry. I finally chose myself. The words felt true, painful and true at the same time, the way honest things often are. I drove home slowly, taking streets I didn't usually take, passing houses with lit windows and the warm glow of lives being lived without pretense. Modest homes with toys in yards and practical cars in driveways. The kind of neighborhood I'd raised Evan in, where people measured success by different standards. When I pulled into my own driveway, my small house looked exactly like what it was. Simple, honest, paid for with money that had been earned and saved, not borrowed and spent. I went inside, turned on the porch light, and made myself chamomile tea. Tomorrow, Lily had a school program I'd been invited to. Dorothy wanted to show me a new bakery downtown. The library needed help organizing the summer reading program. Life full and purposeful, waiting for me to live it. Without apology, without permission. Just mine. 2 weeks after the house was listed, I was washing dishes after dinner when I heard a soft knock at my door. Not the aggressive rapping Evan had delivered weeks before, but something tentative, almost apologetic. I dried my hands and walked to the entrance, wondering who would visit at 7:30 on a Thursday evening. When I opened the door, my breath caught. Lily stood on my porch, her small backpack slung over one shoulder, her face streaked with dried tears. She was 10 years old but looked younger in that moment, vulnerable in a way that made my chest ache. "Grandma," she whispered, "can I stay here tonight?" I pulled her inside immediately, wrapping my arms around her thin frame. She was trembling slightly, her fingers clutching the straps of her backpack like a lifeline. "Of course, sweetheart. Always." I stroked her hair, feeling her lean into me with the kind of relief that comes from finally reaching safety after being scared. "What happened?" "Mom and Dad are fighting again." Her voice was muffled against my shoulder. "They've been fighting all week, but tonight was really bad. Dad said I could come stay with you. He drove me over but didn't come in. He was crying." My heart broke and hardened simultaneously. Crying. Evan was crying. But he'd sent his daughter away rather than shield her from whatever chaos was unfolding between him and Anita. "Well, you're here now, and that's what matters." I pulled back gently to look at her face. "Have you eaten dinner?" She shook her head. "I wasn't hungry earlier." "How about some grilled cheese and tomato soup? That used to be your daddy's favorite when he was your age." A small smile flickered across her face. "Really?" "Really. He'd eat 3 sandwiches if I let him." I led her to the kitchen, settling her at the table while I pulled out bread and cheese. She watched me work, her backpack still on her shoulders like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to fully stay. "You can put that down, honey. Take your shoes off. Get comfortable." She slipped the backpack off slowly and set it beside the chair, but kept it close. The gesture told me more than words could about how unstable her world had become. While the sandwich grilled and the soup heated, I sat across from her, taking her small hands in mine. "Do you want to talk about it?" She looked down at our joined hands. "They're selling the house." "I know. Mom says it's your fault." Her eyes lifted to mine, confused and searching. "She says you're being mean to them, that you took away their money." I took a slow breath, choosing my words carefully. This child didn't need adult problems dumped on her shoulders. She needed truth, but truth given with gentleness. "Sometimes, Lily, grown-ups make choices that don't work out the way they hoped. Your parents wanted a very big, expensive house. I helped them get it, but they needed to be able to keep it on their own. When they couldn't, the house had to be sold. That's not mean. That's just how things work. But Mom said you ruined everything, that you canceled our cruise to punish us. Did you know I wasn't invited on that cruise?" Her forehead wrinkled. "What do you mean?" "Your parents decided they wanted it to be just the 3 of you. Family time without Grandma. Since I wasn't going, it didn't make sense for me to pay for it. Does that seem fair to you? Paying for something you're not allowed to be part of?" She thought about this, her young mind working through the logic. "No, that doesn't seem fair. Life isn't always about being mean or nice, sweetheart. Sometimes it's about what's fair and what isn't, what's right and what isn't. Your mom and dad are upset because things are changing, and change is hard. But that doesn't mean you did anything wrong, and it doesn't mean I did either. Are you mad at Daddy?" The question cut deeper than she knew. I stood to flip the sandwich, using the moment to collect my thoughts. "No, honey. I'm not mad. I'm sad that he forgot some important things your grandpa tried to teach him. But being sad and being mad are different. I still love your daddy. I just can't help him the way I used to anymore." "Why not?" I brought the sandwich and soup to the table, setting them in front of her. "Because sometimes the best way to help someone is to let them figure things out themselves, even when it's hard to watch." She picked up the sandwich, taking a small bite. "Mom says we might have to move to a apartment. That apartments are for poor people." The casual cruelty of that statement, repeated by a child who didn't know better, stung more than any of Anita's angry texts. "Apartments aren't for poor people, Lily. They're for people. Your grandpa and I lived in an apartment when your daddy was born. Some of the happiest years of my life happened in that little place. It's not about how big your home is, it's about who's in it and how they treat each other." She nodded slowly, her eyes tired. I miss how things used to be, when everyone was happy. I know, baby, I miss that too. We sat together while she finished eating, the kitchen warm and quiet around us. When she was done, I ran her a bath with bubble soap that had been under the sink since her last visit months ago. I found an old nightgown of mine that swallowed her small frame, and we laughed as she shuffled around in it like a tiny ghost. I tucked her into the guest room bed, the same one I'd prepared when she was born, the same one that had held so many hopes about family and connection. "Grandma?" she said sleepily. "Am I safe here?" "Always, my love. Always." "Can I stay tomorrow too? I don't have school on Friday." "You can stay as long as you need." She smiled, her eyes already closing. "Will you make pancakes in the morning? How about we make muffins instead? You can help me mix them." "Okay," she murmured. "Blueberry ones? Whatever kind you want." She was asleep within minutes, her breathing deep and steady. I stood in the doorway watching her, this innocent, caught in the middle of adult failures, and felt something fierce and protective surge through me. Whatever happened between Evan and Anita, whatever consequences they faced, I would make sure Lily knew she had a safe harbor, a place where she mattered more than appearances, where love didn't come with conditions or price tags. I closed her door softly and went to prepare the guest bathroom with fresh towels, an extra toothbrush, anything she might need. The next morning, we stood side by side at the kitchen counter, flour dusting our hands and the air filled with the smell of baking blueberry muffins. She wore one of my old aprons tied twice around her waist, concentration on her face as she carefully cracked eggs into the bowl. "Not too hard," I coached. "Gentle, like you're being kind to them." She giggled when a piece of shell fell in, and I showed her how to fish it out with a spoon. We mixed and measured, getting more flour on ourselves than in the bowl, laughing when we realized we'd forgotten to preheat the oven. For those hours, the world outside my kitchen didn't exist. No failing marriages or foreclosed houses or families breaking apart. Just a grandmother and granddaughter making something sweet together, building a memory that would last longer than any mansion ever could. When the muffins came out golden and perfect, we sat at the table and ate them warm, butter melting into the centers. "These are the best muffins ever," Lily declared, her earlier sadness replaced with simple joy. "They are pretty good, aren't they?" She looked at me with those wise young eyes. "I'm glad Daddy let me come here." "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." Outside, life continued its complicated course, but in my small kitchen, with flour still dusting the counters and the sweet smell of baking lingering, everything felt exactly right. Lily stayed that weekend, then the next. By the third weekend, it stopped feeling like visiting and started feeling like something more permanent, more necessary. Evan would drop her off Friday evenings with a duffel bag and a strained smile, picking her up Sunday afternoons with eyes that looked progressively more hollow. We didn't talk much during these exchanges. He'd ask if she'd been good, I'd assure him she had been, and he'd leave with a quiet thank you that sounded more like surrender than gratitude. The house in Coral Springs sold faster than expected. I heard through Janet Morrison that it went to a young family, cash buyers who'd closed within 3 weeks. Evan and Anita moved into a rental apartment across town, 2 bedrooms instead of 5, shared laundry instead of a private room, a parking lot instead of a pool. I wondered how Anita was handling the downgrade but didn't ask. Some questions have answers you already know. By October, the cracks that had been forming became breaks. Evan called one evening while Lily was doing homework at my kitchen table. "Mom," Anita left. His voice was flat, emotionless in the way people sound when they've cried so much there's nothing left. She went to stay with her parents in Tampa. Says she needs space to figure things out. "I'm sorry, Evan." She took most of the furniture. The apartment looks empty now, like nobody lives here. I wanted to say, that's what happens when you build a life on appearances. That when the pretty things are gone, you're left with whatever foundation you actually laid. But he sounded so broken that I just listened instead. "Can Lily stay with you for a while?" he asked. "I'm working longer hours trying to cover the bills, and I don't want her here alone all the time. The apartment complex isn't. It's not the neighborhood we had before." "Of course she can stay. I'll bring more of her things tomorrow. Her school supplies, some clothes." "Evan, take your time. Figure out what you need to figure out. She's safe here." There was a long pause. "Thank you, Mom. For this. For her. She's my granddaughter. This is what family does. Is it? The question came out bitter, because I'm not sure I'd know anymore. I wanted to argue, to defend, to point out all the ways he'd forgotten what family meant, but the brokenness in his voice stopped me. He was already drowning. I didn't need to push his head underwater. Lily moved into the guest room properly after that. We established routines: breakfast together before school, homework at the kitchen table while I prepared dinner, evening walks around the neighborhood, weekend projects, baking experiments, small adventures to the library or the park. She never complained about the change, but sometimes I'd catch her staring out the window with a faraway look, and I knew she was thinking about the house with the pool, about when her parents were still together, about a version of normal that no longer existed. "Are Mom and Dad getting divorced?" she asked one night while we washed dishes together. I'd been expecting the question, but hadn't prepared an answer that felt honest without being hurtful. "I think they might be, honey. Sometimes people realize they want different things, and staying together makes everyone unhappy." "Is it because of the house?" The house was part of it, but it was really about bigger things, about what matters and what doesn't, about treating people with respect. She handed me a plate to dry. "Mom used to be nicer. Before the big house. Success changes people sometimes, not always for the better. Will Dad change back?" I looked at her serious face, this child trying to make sense of adult failures. "I hope so, sweetheart. I really do." The divorce papers came in November. Anita filed in Tampa, citing irreconcilable differences. She wanted primary custody of Lily but agreed to generous visitation. When the court-appointed mediator asked about Lily's current living situation, Evan mentioned that she'd been staying with me on weekends for months, that the arrangement had provided stability during a turbulent time. The mediator noted this, suggested it might be in Lily's best interest to maintain that stability. By December, the custody arrangement was formalized. Lily would live primarily with Evan but spend every weekend and school break with me, a guardian arrangement that gave her roots while her parents figured out how to build separate lives. Evan started visiting on Sunday evenings when he picked Lily up. At first, he'd stay only minutes, uncomfortable in the house he'd grown up in, surrounded by reminders of simpler times. But gradually, the visits stretched longer. One Sunday in January, he sat at my kitchen table while Lily gathered her things upstairs. I made tea without asking if he wanted any, setting a cup in front of him the way I had when he was young and troubled by something at school. He wrapped his hands around the mug. "My company's been struggling. We lost a major client in December. I might get laid off. What will you do if that happens?" "Look for something else, I guess. Maybe something that pays less but has better stability." "I can't afford another failure, Mom. Not with child support and rent and everything else." "Failure isn't the worst thing that can happen, Evan. Refusing to learn from it is." He looked up at me then. Really looked. Like he was seeing me for the first time in years. "You knew this would happen, didn't you? When you pulled your name off the mortgage, when you canceled the cruise, you knew it would all fall apart." I knew it couldn't continue the way it was going. Whether it fell apart or transformed into something better was up to you. "And which do you think happened?" I studied my son, this man who'd lost so much in pursuit of more. His expensive watch was gone, sold months ago. His designer clothes replaced with sensible basics. The arrogance that had hardened his features had softened into something that looked almost like humility. "I think you're learning," I said quietly. "And that's a beginning." He nodded slowly, blinking back tears. "I'm sorry, Mom, for all of it, for how I treated you, for forgetting what you and Dad taught me, for choosing Anita's version of success over the values you raised me with. I know you are. Do you forgive me?" I reached across the table, covering his hand with mine. "I've already forgiven you, Evan. The question is whether you've forgiven yourself." Lily came downstairs then, backpack ready, and we ended the conversation. But something had shifted between us. Not healed completely, but acknowledged, a first step toward repair. As I watched them drive away, Evan's modest sedan, a far cry from the luxury car he'd once driven, I realized something important. My purpose in all of this had never been punishment. It had been guidance, teaching through withdrawal what years of enabling had failed to teach through presence. Love sometimes means letting people fall, and then being there when they're ready to stand. Spring arrived quietly, the way it does in this part of the country, One day the trees were bare, and the next they were budding with new life. I'd been tending my garden when Evan's car pulled into the driveway on a Wednesday afternoon, unexpected and unannounced. He wasn't scheduled to pick up Lily. She was at school, wouldn't be home for another 2 hours. I stood from where I'd been, kneeling beside the tomato plants, brushing dirt from my gardening gloves. Evan got out of the car slowly, and I noticed immediately that something was different about him. Not just his clothes, which had grown progressively simpler over the months, but his entire bearing. The tension that had lived in his shoulders for years seemed diminished. He looked tired, but it was an honest tired rather than the exhausted fakery of someone maintaining an unsustainable pace. "Mom," he said as he approached, "do you have time to talk?" "Always." I gestured toward the porch. "Let me wash my hands." We settled into the chairs I'd arranged there last summer, 2 rockers that faced the street and the world beyond. I'd spent many evenings in these chairs, watching neighbors pass by, thinking about everything that had changed. For a long moment, Evan just sat quietly, his hands clasped between his knees, staring at something I couldn't see. "I got a new job," he finally said. "It's not glamorous. Project manager for a small manufacturing company. The pay is half what I was making before, but it's steady. Good benefits. Reasonable hours. That sounds promising. It's in the industrial park off Route 27, you know, near where Dad used to work." The significance wasn't lost on either of us, full circle, in a way neither of us could have predicted. "I've been thinking a lot about him lately," Evan continued. "About the things he used to say that I didn't really listen to. I thought I understood them, but I was just hearing words. I wasn't actually learning. What made you start listening?" He leaned back in the rocker, the wood creaking gently. "Losing everything, I guess. When Anita left, when I couldn't keep up the apartment rent, when I realized I'd have to move into something even smaller. I hit this moment where I was sitting on the floor of an empty living room, and I couldn't remember the last time I'd actually been happy. Not performing happiness, not buying happiness, just feeling it. A breeze moved through the trees, carrying the scent of jasmine from Mrs. Chen's yard. And I realized Dad was happy," Evan said softly. "He came home every night smelling like motor oil, his back aching, his hands rough. But he was happy. He'd sit at the dinner table and talk about his day like it mattered, like changing someone's oil or fixing their brakes was contributing something real to the world. I used to think that was small, that he'd settled for less than he deserved. And now? Now I think maybe he understood something I didn't. That meaning doesn't come from how much you earn or how impressive your house is. It comes from knowing what you do matters, even if it's simple. Especially if it's simple." I watched my son, this man who'd traveled so far away from himself, only to find his way back through loss. "Your father believed the richest people were the ones with family to come home to," I said quietly. "Do you remember him saying that?" "I do now. I didn't for a long time, but I do now." He turned to look at me directly. "Mom, I need to apologize. Really apologize. Not the half explanations I gave before. I need you to know I understand what I did. I'm listening. I let success make me arrogant. I started measuring my worth by what I owned instead of who I was. And worse, I let Anita convince me that you were somehow less than us because you didn't live that lifestyle. I excluded you. I used you. I treated your love like it was an unlimited resource that would always be there no matter how badly I behaved." His voice cracked slightly. "When you canceled that cruise, when you removed your name from the mortgage, I was furious. I thought you were being vindictive. But you were just protecting yourself from people who'd forgotten how to value you. And I was one of those people. The worst one, actually, because I should have known better. Evan, please, let me finish." He took a shaky breath. "I thought money meant respect. I thought giving Anita everything would make her happy, make our marriage work, make me into someone important. But all it did was make me forget who I was. It made me forget that the boy who grew up in this house, who helped Dad change oil in the driveway, who ate your meatloaf every Sunday, that boy had everything that mattered. And I traded him for a version of myself I didn't even like." Tears were running down his face now, unchecked and unashamed. "I can't undo what I did. I can't give you back the money or the time or the hurt. But I want you to know, I see it now. I see how much you sacrificed, how much you gave, how little I appreciated. And I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry." I reached over and took his hand, the way I had when he was small and scared of thunder. "Thank you for saying that. For meaning it. Can you forgive me?" "I already have, honey. But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. It just means we can build something new on top of what was broken." He nodded, wiping his eyes with his free hand. "I want to build that. I want Lily to grow up knowing what real family looks like. Not the performance version I was creating, but the genuine kind. The kind you and Dad showed me, even though I forgot to pay attention." We sat together as the afternoon deepened, holding hands the way we hadn't in years. Across the street, children played in a yard. A postal truck made its rounds, life continuing its patient rhythm. "Do you know what I think would make your father proud?" I asked softly. "What?" "Not that you're working near where he worked, though that's meaningful, but that you're finally honest about who you are and what matters. That's what he wanted most. Authenticity, not achievement." Evan smiled, sad but genuine. "I'm getting there. It's humbling, starting over at my age, but it feels real in a way nothing has for years. Real is good, real lasts." "Do I get to come back?" His question was vulnerable, childlike. "Not to where we were before, because I don't think we can go back, but to something? To being your son in a way that matters?" I squeezed his hand. "You never stopped being my son, Evan. You just forgot how to be part of a family. And families forgive. Families rebuild. Families give second chances to people who've genuinely changed. I'm trying to change, every day. I know you are. And that's enough." We rocked slowly in the spring air, two people finding their way back to each other through honesty and time. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't fully healed. But it was a beginning. And sometimes, a beginning is all you need. A year had passed since I'd canceled that Caribbean cruise. 12 months of rebuilding, healing, and discovering that life could expand even as certain relationships contracted. The seasons had turned full cycle, and I'd turned with them, stronger and clearer about who I was beneath all the years of accommodating others. Lily was 11 now, taller by 3 inches, wiser by immeasurable degrees. She'd adjusted to her new reality with the resilience children possess when the adults around them provide steady ground. She split her time between Evan's modest apartment and my small house, thriving in both places now that the tension and pretense had dissolved. Evan had kept his job at the manufacturing company. He'd been promoted to senior project manager, a title that meant responsibility rather than prestige, substance rather than status. He dated occasionally, but nothing serious. Most importantly, he showed up. For Lily's school events, for Sunday dinners that had resumed, simpler and more genuine than before. For conversations that went beyond surface pleasantries into real connection. We were rebuilding. Slowly. Honestly. And then one evening in late spring, Lily and I were making dinner together when she said something that stopped me mid-stir. "Grandma, do you think we could go on a trip together, just us?" I looked at her. This child, who'd weathered so much change with such grace. "What kind of trip were you thinking? Maybe somewhere with water? I've never seen the ocean." "Not really. I mean, I've seen pictures, but not the actual ocean." Something shifted in my chest. A memory of that canceled cruise, of turquoise water I'd dreamed about but never seen, of a trip that had represented exclusion and hurt. Maybe it was time to reclaim that dream. Not the expensive, performative version Anita had planned, but something real, something just for us. "I think that's a wonderful idea," I said. "Let me look into it." I spent the next week researching options. Not luxury cruise lines with suites and exclusive dining packages, but something modest and meaningful. I found a 4-day cruise departing from Port Canaveral. An older ship, smaller than the modern behemoths, with straightforward amenities and reasonable prices. The interior cabin cost a fraction of what I'd spent on that canceled reservation. No balcony, no special packages, just passage across water, simple meals, and time together. I booked it for July, during Lily's summer break. When I told her, she threw her arms around me with such joy that I knew I'd made the right choice. We spent weeks planning what to pack, what to do, building anticipation in the way that matters most, through shared excitement rather than expensive preparations. Evan drove us to the port on a bright Thursday morning. He hugged Lily tight before she boarded, then turned to me. "Thank you, Mom, for everything you do for her, for me. We're family," I said simply. "This is what family does. Have fun, both of you. Take pictures." "We will." As Lily and I walked up the gangway, I glanced back once. Evan stood by his car waving, a genuine smile on his face. Not the practiced expression he'd worn during his years of performance, but something real, something Robert would have recognized. Our cabin was small but clean, 2 beds and a tiny bathroom that made us laugh at how compact everything was. Lily loved it immediately, claiming it felt like a cozy fort. We unpacked together, hanging our simple dresses and setting our toiletries on the narrow shelf. That first evening, we stood on the open deck as the ship pulled away from port. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of coral and gold. Lily gripped the railing, her eyes wide as the land grew smaller and the ocean expanded around us. "It's so big," she whispered. "I didn't know it would be this big. Pretty amazing, isn't it?" "Grandma, are you happy?" The question caught me off guard. I looked down at her upturned face, so earnest and open. "Yes, sweetheart, I really am." Even with everything that happened, with Mom and Dad and the house, I thought about how to answer truthfully without burdening her with adult complexity. Sometimes the hardest things teach us the most important lessons. I learned that I'm stronger than I thought, that loving people doesn't mean losing myself, that it's okay to set boundaries, even with family, especially with family. What's a boundary? It's knowing where you end and other people begin. It's saying, "I matter too," even when that's scary. She nodded thoughtfully. "Like when I told Mom I didn't want to hear bad things about you anymore?" My throat tightened. "You did that?" "Yeah." She was saying stuff on the phone to her friend, and I told her it made me sad. That you're a good grandma and I didn't want to hear mean things. She looked up at me. "Was that okay?" I pulled her close, blinking back tears. "That was very okay. That was you having a boundary." Over the next 3 days, we explored the ship together. We ate in the buffet, choosing whatever looked good without worrying about appearances or appropriateness. We watched a magic show in the theater, played trivia games with strangers, and spent hours by the pool reading books side by side. We visited a port in the Bahamas, walking through markets where vendors sold handmade crafts and fresh fruit. Lily bought a shell necklace with her allowance money, declaring it the most beautiful thing she'd ever owned. Everything was simple. Everything was real. On our last night at sea, we returned to the deck after dinner. The ocean stretched endlessly in all directions, dark water reflecting the emerging stars. The ship moved steadily forward, its engines a gentle hum beneath our feet. Lily leaned against the railing, and I stood beside her, my arm around her shoulders. "This was the best trip ever," she said quietly. "For me too. Better than the fancy cruise would have been?" I thought about that question, about the suite I'd never slept in, the excursions I'd never taken, the exclusive dining I'd never experienced. All that money spent on something designed to impress rather than connect. "So much better," I said honestly, "because this one was real. And you're here with me." She tilted her head against my side. "I'm glad you came, Grandma." Those words, so simple and sincere, meant more than she could possibly know. They echoed the moment a year ago when I'd been excluded from a trip I'd funded, when I'd felt erased and diminished, when I'd made the hardest choice to protect my own worth. And here I was now, on the ocean I'd dreamed of seeing, with the person who mattered most, having spent a fraction of the money but gained something infinitely more valuable. Peace, connection, joy without pretense. The ship moved through calm water, cutting a path forward into darkness that felt more like possibility than fear. Behind us, the wake glowed faintly in the moonlight, evidence of where we'd been but not where we were going. I thought about everything I'd lost and everything I'd gained, the relationships that had broken and the ones that had healed, the version of myself I'd surrendered and the woman I'd become. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel left behind. I felt free. The wind lifted my hair, carrying the salt smell of endless ocean. Beside me, Lily hummed softly, content and secure. Above us, stars emerged in their ancient patterns, constant and reliable. And I understood finally that this was what I'd been searching for all along. Not perfection, not performance, not approval from people who'd forgotten how to value what matters. Just this moment, this child, this vast, honest sea. This life I'd reclaimed by finally choosing myself. If this story touched your heart, if you've ever had to make the difficult choice to set boundaries with family, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below sharing your thoughts. What would you have done in my situation? And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in unexpected places. Your support means everything. The ship sailed on through gentle waves, carrying us forward into a future I'd built with my own hands. And it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.